Welcome to BWI Live. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. Ryan Snyder with me. This is our recruiting show. Ryan, this is a busy time of the year. We're going to have an SMU. We're talking about SMU today. We're going to have a Boise State preview show coming up on Monday. I have no idea who's going to be on the show. It might just be me on that show because everyone might be traveling at this point, trying to get out to Arizona. But today we're talking just about recruiting. So welcome to the show. How was your Christmas? You've got kids, so I imagine that was fun.
7 and 5. So we are in peak Christmas mode as far as the kids go. So that was great. Hosted the family yesterday. The hosting is always interesting,
the host
right?
House?
Yeah, we've become the host house since I moved here now.
Big responsibility.
It is. Everything went well. The one thing about when you're hosting though is you're getting both sides of the families, which is great, not complaining. But the one thing about that is everybody buys your kids excessive amount of gifts. So the issue really is not that everybody came, loved it, had a great time. Everybody enjoyed watching the games, kind of a blowout, but they were still fun to watch on Christmas. But now 26, 27, 28, figuring out where the hell I'm going to put all this stuff that everybody bought me. That is probably the most stressful thing about this time of the year, but we'll figure that out with time.
Very good. Hey, I meant to ask this. Do you want to do playoff beards? Because I just have been in semi-off-season mode.
Playoff beards are for the Phillies only. Only for the Phillies in this house. Sorry, bud.
All right. So here's the thing. Is like I have just been lazy. Like the level of things that have happened with Christmas and the stress of trying to get ready with presents and things like that, I have not kept up with that. So I just pivoted into, this is a playoff beard. But I don't know if anyone wanted to go with me on that.
Sorry, buddy. This is Penn State is my job. The Phillies are my passion. I will grow a beard for the Phillies. Fortunately, not fortunately, but for the beard's sake and for my wife's sake, fortunately, the Phillies got knocked out a little early this year. But let's get into recruiting. No one cares about the Phillies right now. It's December.
Yeah, fair. I don't care about the Phillies in October, so there's that. We got a lot.
I'm getting off this podcast then. Screw you, buddy. Click an X. No, I'm done. Let's go.
We got a lot coming up today. We're going to be talking about SMU, the visitors that attended a game, bought their own tickets, went to the game. We also have a post-Christmas present for you here on the YouTube channel, which you got if you joined BlueWhiteIllustrated.com over at the site. Ryan's put in a couple of RPM picks recently. So if you want to get the information on those as they come out, we talk about them on the show. When we get to the show, join right now for just $1. Get access to what we do for a week, and you can try us out, and then you can decide if you want to spend 2025 with us. Perfect time to do it because it just build it into your budget for 2025. Your New Year's resolution. I want to know more about Penn State football and recruiting. I want to get more plugged in. This is the way to do it. So try us out for a week, subscribe for the year, or go all in right now. Some of the things that you're going to be reading when you hear this show today is Penn State practice updates. This is happening at the same time the practice is happening, which is why Fitz isn't with us because we are the magic of the internet. We are recording this early, and normally I like to just have everyone believe the lie, but we do so much interaction with you in the live chat that it would be like as if we were dead, and this was just an obvious recording. So just wanted to be upfront about that. So let's get into it. Penn State has a commitment in the transfer portal, a big addition, another wide receiver. So Ryan, let's break down Devonte Ross, Troy wide receiver coming to the Nittany Lions. What do you know? Where do you want to start the conversation? Devonte Ross, the latest commit to Penn State through the portal.
Well, I think you start that conversation with the fact that Jared Parker's was his head coach, right? So those are obviously very strong ties to Penn State staff, and James has made it very clear that when guys enter the portal, I mean, they're getting as much information as they can from every avenue. And so the fact that this is somebody who, always had good terms on Penn State. Obviously, he got promoted, became an offensive coordinator. Like that was never a sore loss from what I understand. They didn't want him to go, obviously. There's good ties there. And I think that probably played a big role in Penn State being comfortable and taking Devonte Ross. But, look at the stats, right? Obviously had a breakout year this past season, 76 receptions, over 1,000 yards and 11 touchdowns. I think that's exciting to fans. I think if you watched the Iowa game and some of the ways he was able to make plays in that game, he had a kick return in that game, I believe, right?
I believe he did. Yeah.
Yeah.
He had 2 long touchdowns as well. So lots of big plays.
So those are always encouraging. What role he's going to play at Penn State will be interesting moving forward. You would think that, he's somewhat like an Omari Evans to some degree, just from the little bit that I've seen. We'll see long term, if Omari were to move on or anything like that. I don't there's no information right now that that's a definite, but time will tell. But that's just kind of when I watch him play, it kind of reminds me of that a little bit. 5'11", 160. Originally was a Kentucky commit. Did not end up at Kentucky. Yeah,
he's a small 160.
Yeah, I would certainly think that they would like to get some weight on him with time. But with that said, I mean, look, if you can avoid tackles and break down the field and just avoid cornerbacks and safeties altogether, I don't know how much it really even matters to. But time will tell. Out of Cartersville, Georgia, and like I said, he was originally going to Kentucky, ended up at Troy, and really took a big step in 2023 as far as receptions and all that stuff go. I think it was 400 and some yards that year. I apologize, 447 is what I thought it was, but it was nothing like this past season where he really became one of Troy's predominant playmakers. Maybe their top guy. So time will tell.
588 yards in the first 2 years, and then 1,042 last year.
Mm-hmm. The only thing that really pops out to me when I'm just like, we're not trying to be like negative or anything, but just like when I look at numbers and stuff, like there's a lot of positive things there. The one thing is just a 12.8% drop percentage. That was the one thing that kind of grabbed my eyes as far as a negative. So I don't know enough about their quarterback though, and stuff like that I don't want to put too much stock into that because I didn't watch Troy a ton this year.
So I did some advanced scouting on him, and I took a look at the film to look at some of the games where he succeeded. Obviously, watching the game against Iowa, and then there was another game, I believe, against Indiana. They did a great job, Indiana did, at taking him away by denying the scheme. So if he was running an out route, they would flood that zone, or they would play a high-low on him specifically so the quarterback couldn't get him the football. So he didn't have a big impact on that game, but to me, that was very much Indiana knowing the situation and being better schematically to take him away from those designed plays. And then against Iowa, a good double move, a couple big plays in that game, some flipping of that. The scheme did a great job of getting him wide open down the field. To me, the interesting thing is how is he going to play in that leveled up competition? Because there were times you watched Iowa, and anytime they pressed him, I think twice, and one time the DB accidentally knocked him over. So 161 is a real issue to me. 5'11", he is not big. He does not solve Penn State's biggest problem, which is the physicality through contact. If you get into a game where the defense is allowed to grab at, that catch point of 8 to 10 yards and be physical at the route stem, you may have an issue there. But the hope, I think, here, watching him on film, there's a lot of room to grow. And I don't mean physically. Although hopefully, this is the thing, is like he's a 2021, I think 2022 was his first year playing. I can't remember if he's a 21 or a 22, but he's an older player at this point. So being at Troy, what's the resource bump for him? Does he get up to 171 in the offseason? I don't think, maybe 168, somewhere where he's just not teetering on the bottom edge of what's playable for a football player. These guys can succeed in college football, but they are the exceptions to be consistently productive. And then it becomes the deployment factor that you mentioned. At Troy, almost 80%, 77.5% of the time, he was lined up out wide. So he has faced, boundary coverage, outside receiver coverage. So I do think that is a possibility in the transition. But you talk about that drop percentage. There is a little bit of contested catches plus drops, to me, is kind of where I lean to when I see that. Contested catch percentage is 38%. That's not good. So you combine those two numbers, those are a lot of the drop passes, a lot of the incompletions when you throw into his coverage. So I do think this, to me, profiles as a guy that you have to have a specific plan for. You have to get him into space and allow him to use his speed once he gets there.
Okay. Well, I like the breakdown. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
For the record, he played 3 years, obviously, at Troy, so he would have 2 years to play one. Okay. Obviously, if there's an injury or something like that, he could redshirt and come back for 2026. But I don't, there was no COVID year or anything like that, from what I understand.
Okay. Yeah, he's an interesting player. There's a lot of inefficiencies in his game, too, where you watch him, and for as fast as he is laterally, there's not the same separation skill consistently. So I think that they're banking on him being a speed-on-speed player and developing those route running skills, which is interesting to say. Jared Parker was his head coach, to be like, yeah, he could be a better route runner when he was Penn State's receivers coach for a year.
Yeah,
but
you can only do so much when you're the head coach, though. Yeah, only.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean by that. So
Yeah.
look, it is what it is. Obviously, was it Malachi Fields? I believe it was. Ends up at Notre Dame. We knew the former Virginia wide receiver was someone Penn State was interested in, and
he's an interesting one too.
Yeah, there's still a lot of guys still available, whether they're Penn State level or not. Time will tell. There is that first week of January though. Oh, I forget the dates off the top of my head. I'm sorry. I'm going to try and look it up real quick. That guys can take portal visits. Excuse me. It'll be January 6th through the 11th. That if you're in the portal, you can take a visit. And I actually believe that's the case as well for high school prospects as well. But 6, 7, 8. Well, actually, I guess for Penn State, if they're playing in the semifinals,
right,
it wouldn't even matter because they'll have to get down to Miami on the 7th. Yeah. So. Interesting. We'll see where things go with that. Looking at like their junior day schedule and stuff too, this is segueing to high school stuff, but like, maybe the 11th, if they played on the 9th, they could probably host a junior day on the 11th. But if they were to make it all the way to national championship, I don't think you could do anything on the 18th with the game obviously being on January 20th. So right now, if you're looking at high school recruiting and what's coming down the road, like January 25th and what would be February 1st, I believe it is. Those would be the two marquee junior day dates that the staff's going to push really hard for and get as many guys as they can. Time will tell on the 11th and 18th.
It's interesting because you are running into some friction with the recruiting schedule, but there's no better recruiting tool than winning a national championship. So it is a very interesting for a process-oriented program who wants to hit all these benchmarks and maximize all the opportunities. And if you're dropping some of the opportunities, I'm sure there is a level of discomfort, but obviously the focus, as James Franklin has said recently, is the main thing. Yeah, you got to make sure you win the games that are on the schedule that are most important to then perpetuating that success.
One other thing I'll add too is, January is no longer, it's a true contact period. Like they're allowed to actually have contact with 2026 guys in January. So what'll be interesting is if all these other schools are out on the road, how does Penn State handle that? We know Kenny Sanders has gone out on the road a little bit this year. I believe, that you can have a decent amount of staff outside of your top, your normal 10 assistants out on the road nowadays. For example, I think maybe Dan Connor was one of the other ones too that went out on the road. So just how they handle that, maybe a Danny O'Brien, I could see maybe some of their recruiting staff having to take on that load while Penn State's obviously preparing, or what they hope to be preparing for a quarterfinal, or excuse me, it would be what would that be, semifinals, and we'll see about the national championship. But lots of stuff to figure out in January. We will figure that out here in the next 2 weeks.
Last thing before we get into SMU, what do you think of the portal so far for Penn State? It has been a bizarre December in so many different ways. It feels like the transfer portal has been a bit of an afterthought. They have obviously hit receiver, but even at receiver, I don't know that I would say the two players that they've gotten satisfy the need from Penn State fans specifically of finding the guy. Maybe that was a thing that wasn't ever going to happen in the portal, but these are very much guys that fit into the system and scheme, but don't solve some of the major problems that Penn State has from a positional situation. And then you fold on top of the fact, defensive tackle, defensive end, all these conversations, they have Nittany White, but that's been the only defensive lineman. I guess, how do you gauge the portal activity given what they've been going through at this point? And do you see an opportunity for them to add those impact players, if that's what they can get out of the portal at some point before everything closes?
It's all about money right now. And so this is the thing. So obviously collectives are still around by the start of July 1. People expect the collectives will still be around then, but the kind of the money that is in that pool to last you that time, things will potentially be a lot different when revenue sharing starts, or at least it's projected to. We'll see what happens in April. So what we're seeing right now, or at least from what I've read and heard from a few people close to Penn State, is that the money is just on a crazy level. And we know Penn State has always taken pride in taking care of the guys that get them to where they are. Drew Aller's coming back. I don't know any details for Drew Aller's thing, but if you think, you got to remember for a second that like Drew Aller coming back for another year, like there's no way that some financial gains were not done.
That was part of the conversation. Right.
And there's a lot of money tied up in quarterbacks. I mean, what was it? Mensa from Duke was talk about he's getting $4 million a year at Duke. I mean, so let's think about that for a second.
I'm going to look up what a backup in the NFL makes. You keep talking.
I mean, Bo Prabula got $1.5 million at Missouri, right? Like we know those numbers because they made moves and their collectives or whatever it was put that information out there. So I think you got to take things in perspective of Penn State has always leaned towards taking care of their guys. They obviously want a Nick Singleton to come back, or a Trey Wallace to come back, Omari. Like they have guys in place where they want them to come back. Katron Allen. So what we're seeing here is, I think behind the scenes, they're trying to make sure that they can do everything they can to retain those guys, keep them next season. Not to mention on defense, Nittany, Kobe King, Zane Durant. Like those are all guys that would fetch more money on the open market if they were to leave. Penn State needs to take care of those guys. And because I think that they're focusing on that primarily, it makes it much more difficult for them to go get a Micah Hudson. When Micah Hudson's going to Texas A&M. I mean, we know all about Texas A&M and you know how aggressive they can be. Eric Singleton Jr., for example, the former Georgia Tech wide receiver, he's going to Auburn. Like look at where these top guys are going, and it's easier to kind of figure things out. Nick Anderson went to LSU. Barry and Brown, LSU. Kevin Coleman, former Mississippi State guy, Missouri. We know how aggressive Missouri is. Miami. There's for CJ Daniels. Like when you look at these very, very top tier guys, and I know Penn State fans are saying we need these top tier guys. We got to pay them, whatever it takes. Well, I don't know what the money is behind the scenes, but I'm willing to bet it's all upwards of well over $1 million for receivers, and just it's risky. It's risky.
Yeah, and I don't know that I've seen a guy that's like an impact wide receiver, number one, no holes kind of out there that's realistic. And that is me kind of the guys that have been on their radar that I've taken a look at. I don't know that I've seen one that goes, oh, they have to get that guy. There's been some names floated around, but it's never been, reported by you guys that they, either a visit or any serious interest. And so like you are chasing and you are throwing a lot of money. I want to wrap it up with this. And you mentioned, what was it, $4 million at Duke?
Yeah.
Top backups in the NFL. I just kind of scrolled down with my eyeballs till I found Jacoby Brissett. Total value of his contract is $8 million, 6.5 average guaranteed. The next one, Tyrod Taylor, 4.2. So right after that is the Duke quarterback. So a backup quarterback in the NFL, a high-end backup in the quarterback in the NFL is a low-end college starter. Wow. Here we are. We have officially found we found the cap numbers and the translations for how all of this works. And I don't even know what Imalava or any of the starting quarterbacks in college football at some of these NIL centric places are making. Like I'm sure some of those numbers are out there, but this is, we are now in a 1-to-1 comparison as far as the pay level for these players.
And I don't think this will last long. I do think we're in a 2-3 year thing where this will happen until once revenue sharing gets fully worked in, we're talking another year or two. Like collectives aren't going away. If you guys are donating to a collective right now, I'm sorry, they're still going to be asking you guys for that in the coming years. And look, collectives are probably going to be the difference between, separating the top 10 teams and not. So that's not going away completely, but it's just the way that the structure is supposed to be, where it's, through an NCAA clearinghouse, and it actually has to be like, anything you're making on the side, you actually have to do commercials for and things like that instead of just straight pay for play. That's where it's going to be tricky. And I think a lot of schools right now are saying, well, we got all this money in here, which is basically just for pay for play. Let's get as much out there as we can right now before July 1, which, that's when the cap number and all those kind of things will take effect. So it's we could go 20 more minutes on this topic. I understand why Penn State fans want one of those elite top ranked guys in the portal. But again, just I think you'll understand the picture better if they're able to keep Nick Singleton and Zane Durant and Denai Dennis Sutton, Kobe King, like these guys that could go to the NFL. They're able to keep them for 2025. You got to remember that a lot of that money and how crazy the market is right now. And these guys all have good agents. They don't have, the Johnny up the street being their agent. They got real agents. That's going to, I would hope, paint the picture better for why Penn State's not spending stupid money on an Eric Singleton, a Kevin Concepcion, Zachariah Branch. Maybe they should spend stupid money on him, but we can talk about that another day.
Well, they just got Devonte Ross. Having two guys like that in an offense may be amazing, or it may be a total disaster because they kind of are the same guy in some ways. Obviously,
no, they are. There's a lot of similarities there for sure.
But weirder things have happened. So let's talk about SMU recruiting, which is not a thing, but Penn State was able to get some players on campus that were interested in paying their own way, either driving in at 5 a.m. and avoiding hotel costs or, paying up and going to the game. So this is a very interesting home game situation, obviously a benefit, but not one that you can fully take advantage of. If you're a playoff team, you don't get an extra game of recruiting, but players were at the game that are 2026 recruits, not just guys that are commits to the class. So what do you know about those players, and who did you talk to?
So the way the calendar fell this year, with December 22nd being the last day of what's called a quiet period. Quiet periods really aren't that quiet. It's usually just when visits are allowed. Someday we'll rename all these silly names for outdated recruiting calendar, but we'll get into that later. Long story short, because of that, recruits were allowed to have minor interactions with the staff. Now, here's what you need to know. Due to the NCAA rules, staffs cannot provide tickets. They had to pay $100, $80, $200, whatever it was for wherever they sat. The recruits and their families had to pay that on their own. And then also on top of that, there wasn't, providing all these different meals and kind of things that you see during a normal recruiting weekend. The recruiting section didn't really have, a section of recruits. Guys were just kind of all splattered all over the place. Again, because they're just buying the tickets on their own. But again, because it was secondly still a quiet period, if someone like Troy Hune, for example, commit, of course, came out from California, he was, I think, here Thursday evening. I don't know exactly if he was with the staff Friday or anything like that, but that could have happened. I haven't talked to Troy yet about it, but there was that was allowed, and even Saturday to some degree it would have been allowed. So the big thing to note, though, is, at least in my opinion, was that there were 4 really intriguing 2026 guys who did come, who are not committed at the moment. Peyton Falzone, of course, he's a quarterback athlete out of Nazareth, paid his own way to come down to Penn State. And I think that's really intriguing. Of course, he was committed to Virginia Tech earlier. Peyton's been pretty steadfast on the fact that he wants to play quarterback in college, but we also saw him run routes for Penn State at camp. So just very curious to see where that goes. But we're talking about a 6'5" plus athlete. Yeah. He ran like a 4.5 at Penn State's camp. The guy's his size and
can I
his
jump
athleticism.
In here?
Go ahead. Yeah.
I think it really says something that he's a top 300 player in the On3 rankings, top 200 and 201 in 247 and ESPN. And I don't know if it's a clear-cut thing that he is a quarterback. He's such a good athlete. He is so impressive physically, and all of these metrics of this guy's going to succeed at some position, that everyone's pretty certain that even though he may not be a quarterback, or he may be a quarterback, we still don't know, he's still a top 300 player consensus in America at minimum, and some places have him in the top 200.
So time will tell. All I know is Penn State's not going to just not recruit some of these elite athletes, obviously, within their own state. Yeah. So let's see where that goes. The thing that's interesting is they have Troy Hune committed. Obviously, Gavin Sidwar had an amazing year at LaSalle. They have an offer, Gavin. There's enough interest in Gavin that, I think if they didn't have Troy committed, they would probably have, be taking another step in that recruitment. So what's interesting there is just the whole 2 quarterback dynamic. If Falzone were to commit down the road, and, really, is he definitely a quarterback or not? Again, time will tell there, but that's just interesting to me, because Hune is a guy that
he's got some work
about.
He's got some work to see. I was actually wondering this myself watching his film, and this is where I got to talk to. I'm wondering how much work does he need to do to be a quarterback? Because there's some things with his throwing motion that I think
talking about Peyton or Hune?
Yeah, Falzone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm talking about Peyton Falzone, because he wants to be a quarterback. So what are the things? This is how my mind works. What's the scenario? What's the avenue for him to be a quarterback? And I think throwing motion is a little bit that's a fundamental thing that is hard. So if you're a quarterback evaluator and you want to recruit a quarterback, typically you don't want somebody that needs a lot of work in one of these really ingrained areas. You can see the way he throws the football. There's a certain amount of inefficiency in the way he delivers the football from my amateur eyes. If it doesn't look like the guys that I've watched who have done it correctly and what I've learned and the things I've investigated about how to throw the football correctly, it's so important. So that aspect of it, he would have to do work on that to completely change his arm motion and sort of the way his body delivers the football. And that is a very hard thing to do. But if he did, how far away is he from being a quarterback, an actual quarterback to Penn State? Then he's super intriguing, because if you can go through the Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts conversion to being a quarterback, not just a guy who is big and athletic, then you've got a guy that there is no ceiling on his ability. And so I think it's interesting. He's such an interesting prospect the more I've dug into him.
Time will tell. We will see. Want to move on a couple other guys real quick. Damari Simeon was kind of the surprise guy that I did not know about going into it. We did enough little research, reaching out to guys in the region. And Simeon was, I still haven't talked to him about it. I reached out. He hasn't got back to me, but we do know that he came up. Damari Simeon right now is a top 50 prospect, the third ranked defensive lineman in the entire country. So obviously getting a guy from New Jersey to spend his own money and come up in what felt like Winnipeg that day, I think it says something. Time will tell. He's got more visits to take, and he's getting plenty of offers now. So he's a guy that I see.
This is going to be a national recruit, right? This is going to be a national recruiting conversation.
This was your guy at camp, man. I always bring it up. I remember you pointing him out to me, and obviously we learned a lot about him since. But getting Simeon back, I thought was really important. And just to stay along those lines too, like Alex Haskell. Another really important defensive line prospect for Penn State. I mean, Haskell and Simeon's honestly maybe 1 and 2 at the moment, or it's a little too early to say that, but they're certainly, that top end of the board. That's absolutely right. That I feel comfortable saying. And I mean, Alex Haskell, he may be the most underrated player in the state right now. When you look at rankings, like we have him at number 20 in the state. I would argue Matt Sieg's down there too. He's another guy we got to get reevaluated. But Penn State does not look at Haskell that way at all. So he's a guy that is incredibly high on Barnes's board, just like Damari Simeon is. And time will tell where that recruitment goes. But whenever these guys are paying. Go ahead.
He's gotten so much bigger since the first time we saw him. And we saw him, I think, as a freshman at camp. And, just the jersey colors, I still think of him in the gray jersey where he's like 6'1", 6'2". This dude, and I think you and Fitz called it that he was going to be a defensive tackle eventually. And I think that's what he looks like now. But he's retained those movement skills. So just to put a point on Simeon and Haskell, these are super athletic defensive tackle prospects, defensive line prospects in general for Penn State that I think when you say, they're up there, they fit. These are Penn State defensive tackles. Like they fit the mold of athletic, and they've got the size, I think, to be a complete tackle tandem if both of those guys were to decide to join the Nittany Lions.
Right. So we'll see. He hasn't... The thing with Haskell is he doesn't talk a ton, so just where else he's all visited and all that kind of need to get a better feel for. But we know he's been to Penn State a handful of times already. I want to say 4 or 5 times, and that's always a positive sign. So I getting 2 really good defensive tackles up here for a game where, again, they had to pay their own way and all those things. Like I'm really curious to see. Like we're looking back at these 3 guys, and I'll mention Kaden Gebhardt too here in a second. He was also up, but like what's the hit rate on the 4 guys who pay their own way to come up to this game? Like to me, it feels like they should get like 75% of it. Maybe they're not going to miss on one, but to me, like, man, that's a very telling sign when you're willing to pay the money you had to pay for it. And obviously hotels were not available at all in the area, so just that's, I'm going to be very curious to see these 4 specific players and how things end up in their recruitments. But hey, let's get into Kaden Gebhardt real quick.
Yeah. Speaking of guys who had a chance to go to a different game and went to this game.
Yeah. Super interesting. And that's why we saved him for last too, because Kaden Gebhardt lives 15 miles from Ohio Stadium. And we had a good talk the other day, and he was like, I'm going through it. I'm debating on which game I'm going to go to. And really, big reason why I came to Penn State was because Bo Perbula transferred, and he knew his buddy, Ethan Grunkmeyer, may get his first snaps ever. And sure enough, he did. Felt bad for Grunk with that interception because it wasn't his fault. But, getting those snaps, man, for him will hopefully be so crucial and down the road. But long story short, with Kaden, I mean, he's made it very clear for a long time that he and Grunk are very close friends. They played together when Kaden was a freshman, and they've remained very close friends since. We were actually talking the other day. I believe this was, I forget what day I did the interview, Friday or Saturday. But long story short, Grunk was home for a day or two, and he's like, actually, I'm about to go meet him in like an hour, which was, I kept that out of the interview just, because it's not anyone's business really. But I thought it was interesting that like, oh, they really are close friends. Like every time Grunk's home, they're hanging out. So that's I think a very positive thing for Penn State moving forward. And then obviously the relationships. Penn State got on Kaden well before most other prominent schools got involved. Of course, he came to camp. T. Frank, that was another guy I know you got to watch as well at camp. And whether he's going to be a line position or a linebacker, I think he's recruiting him more so as a linebacker right now. But there's some talk about him potentially being in that line position down the road. So we'll see where things go. But like, this is a guy that C. Wiltfong has already logged a pick for Penn State. He gets the Ohio State offer, and then some of our Ohio State guys put in picks as well for the Buckeyes. When you consider his proximity. But like, I do generally believe Penn State's leading this recruitment, especially after this talk we had the other day. And if they were able to pull a player from Columbus or right outside Columbus in Lewis Center, Ohio, that the Buckeyes were generally recruiting, I think it's just another positive sign for where Penn State's going here moving forward.
This is the BWI Live Show, and things are all kinds of different here on the show today. We're recording this in the afternoon on Thursday. We've got Penn State practice. You're probably going to be reading updates after you're done with this show. So everything is all over the place. But one thing that is absolutely certain that you need to know about is our sponsors of today's show, including My Perfect Franchise. Andy Ludicky of My Perfect Franchise. He is a consultant who helps you find your next step in your future. If you are a corporate executive who has, management experience, maybe you are in middle management and you want to get out, that's really who he's interested in talking to. People with a similar background to him, because that's where he was. He was in the corporate structure. He was traveling all the time. He wasn't able to make money for himself or see his family or get ahead. So what he wanted to do was he wanted to do all of those things. And that's what he's done. And then he wants to share that success with you. Andy, 404-973-9901, or Andy at myperfectfranchise.net. He's going to take you through the process of owning your own business in the corporate structure of a franchise. He also has the ability to help you buy a small market, hometown business as well. You can buy a individual business from him as well. He's got the process down to help you make the right P&L decisions about, looking at the income, making sure that you understand what you're getting into. And that's really what he's about, is he's about making sure you make the right decision, not just finding you and copy paste you into the same environment that he's done for all of his other clients. And there's been a lot of success stories, 2 of them coming from the Blue White Illustrated message board and from the Penn State community. So this is something that has tangible success. We had an interview with a former Penn State baseball player who has joined Andy and owns, I think, a blinds company down south. So there are real success stories. And if you want to check that out, that's something you should definitely invest the time to investigate to see if it's the right fit for you. And then if you want to move forward with that, he goes through a whole thing. His services are 100% free so that you know what you're getting into. And speaking of knowing what you're getting into, none of us know what we're getting into with this college football playoff, Ryan. It's been ridiculous. The number of different changes in just our rhythm and the experiences that we've had during the postseason. Everyone's going through that. So this is where collegiate athletic travel comes in. They did not put a Fiesta Bowl package together because a lot of people have been to Arizona recently. Penn State went to the Fiesta Bowl, Saquon Barkley's 90-yard touchdown. Everyone remembers that, having a great time. The other thing is, if they win, they're going to be playing Notre Dame or Georgia in the Orange Bowl in Florida. It's been a while since Penn State's been to the Orange Bowl. People were very excited about that in their initial research. So that's the package they're offering, because they understand you're not made of money and you're probably having to make some decisions about where to go and which one of these bowl games you might want to go to. Maybe if Penn State, you don't think they're going to make the national championship game, or maybe you can't afford that one, you can definitely make your way to Florida. And you should do that with Collegiate Athletic Travel. They are the premier collegiate athletic travel leader in sports fan travel for over 50 years in partnership with Center for Travel, your state college-based go-to companies for Penn State bowl trips. This potential trip to Florida, if they beat Boise State, is a seaside package. They have hotel reservations where you're going to be on the beach in Florida in January, and you have football. Both of those things, it's like dessert. And then, whatever comes after, I don't know. That fell apart right in my mouth. Air packages feature round-trip air transportation from select Pennsylvania cities, deluxe hotel accommodations, airport and game transfers, pregame ticket events, as well as game tickets, and a feature including Chalk Talks from the Blue White Illustrated staff. So you can hang out with us. You can get a free show, private discussion about football from the staff that go to the game, and of course, all the other amenities that go along with people that have done this forever. They know the locations. They know the hotels. They know how to get you the best possible experience that you may want, rather than just getting you to the game on an airplane that you're hoping stays together in the air and maybe you land and your baggage is lost. I was talking to Joel, the owner, and he said, by the way, when you land in Florida, the bags are taken to your hotel room and the bus pulls up to the plane. You don't go through the airport. You get like private jet sort of accommodations with collegiate athletic travel. So 814-238-4987 or athletictravel.com is where to get all of those. I appreciate you sticking with us through that as we go through today's BWI Live Friday show, Ryan.
I did collegiate athletic travel to, excuse me, I flew with them to the previous Fiesta Bowl, actually. I think Nate and I maybe did it for the Rose Bowl too. It was nice having a charter flight, and like everything you said there, it is nice having that stuff taken care of. So we did the Chalk Talk. I definitely did the Chalk Talk in the Fiesta Bowl. I can't remember for the Rose Bowl or not, but we'll see how things progress there. I'm not sure if I'm going to go or not, but either way, the Chalk Talk was always a fun thing. We do that. I think we did the morning of the game. Just you get all types of questions, which is fun though. It keeps us on our toes, obviously, because especially now in the transfer portal recruiting age, I got to think about how I answer some of those questions sometimes. But for me, at least, that's how it was. But time will tell. But that was a good experience, though. Honestly, I mean, getting a charter flight and all those kind of things, it was a good experience for us, no doubt.
Yeah, so make sure you check that out again at athletictravel.com. I'm going to put the website in the description of the video. Okay, so we saved the best for last. Here's the thing, Ryan. When I fell apart on air in the live read there, I hate cliches. Like, if I can avoid saying having your cake and eating it too, I will try and do that. And then I get in the middle of it and I go, that was stupid. Well, here's a post-Christmas present for everybody coming from you. It's a new prediction for a player to join the Nittany Lions. We actually have two of them here to end the show. So where do you want to start in terms of our recruits that you have a pick in for? And of course, you get this information. You go to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. When he writes it, you can have that conversation with the message board. But Ryan, here we are at the end of December. Who are you looking forward to in the future for 2026 joining the Nittany Lions?
Well, Wadiq Collier is the one who's put it out there publicly that he's planning to announce his decision on January 19th. So I feel like that's probably the best one to start with. And I don't think it's too much a surprise that Penn State has been linked to as the team to beat with the new Magaretti prospect. Of course, he's out of Philadelphia. I think the big thing with Wadiq was he came up to camp this year, really impressed the staff. He's still raw in a lot of ways as a defensive end, but man, there's so many little things there, especially as he grows with size.
Look at
that I know Dion Barnes is really excited about. What is he, 6'5", 200 right now? So he's got a lot of weight and stuff to add. But it always felt to me that, especially after that camp in Penn State, the positive feedback that they got was, it always felt then to me was like, okay, if he goes out, and has a pretty good season, he'd be a surefire take for Penn State. And all feedback that we've received in the last couple of weeks has been very encouraging as far as how his season progressed and all that. So I do think that the Nittany Lions are in a good shape to land him. That, of course, would be, when would that be? That'd be Sunday.
It's the day before the national championship.
Yeah. Anyway, so we'll see where things progress. I mean, his top five, I think, was Penn State, Miami, Syracuse, Rutgers, West Virginia. I believe those were the top five. Of course, I mean, Penn State should be the favorite among those schools, and I do think he wants to stay close to the home, and obviously Barnes has really strong ties to Philadelphia as well. So I think when you add that all up, it looks really good for Penn State. We'll find out here in a couple of weeks from now, about a little over 3 weeks from now. But again, it just, once he came to camp, they signed off on what they saw there. They understood it. Good junior season. Now he's ready to commit. I mean, all signs point to the Nittany Lions.
Yeah, and I think this fits into the conversation with like a Malachi Williams. Got a similar frame, a little bit bigger from a frame size. I love the length, because when you're 6'5" and you got a wingspan like that, first off, I always mention, and this is something now, that it's not just me. Like, I don't want to make it sound like, oh, I'm big on arm length. This is a major thing when you're talking about upside for a defensive lineman or an offensive lineman, winning the point of contact, having the ability to win with your hands. That comes down to, do you get the initial punch? And when you look like a basketball player out there on the football field, that's a great first sign. And then you talk about the frame, 200 pounds, I don't care. He looks like he can be 245, 250 pounds easily. And then it's, once he gets above that threshold, how much bigger is he determines whether he's a freak or whether he's just a very good defensive end for Penn State. And I think all of those things are possible just on the first blush there. So that's why I was a little surprised that his list wasn't a little wider of Big Ten teams or of other teams that Penn State normally competes with, because everything you see on film there, everything you see from his abilities, I have no notes. Maybe just a little bit lean, but not, again, who cares?
So to me, like I think Malachi was like 235-ish. So there's he obviously has a good bit of weight compared to Wadiq. In some ways, I would maybe compare him a little bit to Chaz Coleman. Now Chaz was like 215, 220. So he has a good amount of weight on Wadiq too.
I was projecting more of where Wadiq might be at the start of his senior season, where he might be about 215, 220.
Right. And we're talking, I mean, now Malachi's up to like, 245 almost. So, long story short, that why I bring up Chaz is like, do I think Wadiq is the athlete that Chaz is? No, I don't think that. But when I look at the way they have success in high school, it's really just based off of athleticism more than, proper technique and things like that. I mean, Chaz Coleman had success by using basketball moves, basically spins and all types of stuff. Where Wadiq is just, I think he's just a lot more athletic than a lot of the guys he's going against, and he's using some of those moves as well. But to me, they're similar from that perspective, where it's like, okay, well, once these guys maybe do learn some technique, obviously get some time in the strength staff with Losi and them, that's where you'll maybe see them explode. So to me, that's kind of what I'm looking at with Collier, and time will tell. Again, I'm not saying he's Chaz Coleman though from a crazy athletic perspective, because Chaz Coleman is a freak, and there's a reason that we made that very clear here over the last couple of weeks. Yeah,
he's built different. Like he's a much thicker overall prospect. Where I have no question he's going to be 255, 260. Like that's the difference here. Is the question about Collier is whether or not he's going to get to that final size that you would like of an Abdul Carter, who's basically 260 and has got perfectly proportioned dimensions.
Collier ain't getting to Abdul Carter size. I ain't no chance on that.
Right. But like the frame though, like he's 6'5", and so you've got a little bit more room to play with. You got a little bit more, bone structure to put muscle on. So maybe nobody is Abdul Carter. Maybe even Chaz Coleman isn't Abdul Carter, but you feel like from that size perspective, that's a really good opportunity. And so you put enough of those guys through the process, you're going to spit out some good defensive ends on the other side. And I think this is a strong addition to 2026 from that particular perspective. But we've got another one here. Like I said, we've got two, and I apologize if I cut you off on Wadiq there, but
no, you're good.
Who's our next player that you think is going to join the class of 26?
Yeah, Marlon Bright, offensive tackle out of DePaul Catholic. We got him at 6'6", 270 right now. And similar stories when it comes to camp and just having solid information. I think that's where it really started with Marlon Bright. Came up to camp in June 2023. Good numbers. I wouldn't say it's like elite from like an Egan Boyer perspective or Owen Alcini perspective as far as like some of these crazy numbers. But I do think it's fair to compare him to like what we saw from Maxwell Hiller this year, what we saw from Leighton Von Brandt this year, because they're obviously sophomores right now. Marlon, his camp performance was as a sophomore at the time. So, you're looking at a guy that has a really good athletic base too. And I think the other thing to keep in mind with him is his family comes from an incredibly athletic family. Excuse me. His dad, Mike, is one of the best basketball players all time at Bucknell. One of the only 4 guys who has put up, I think it's 1,600 points and 800 rebounds, maybe 1,500 points. Either way, he's in the Bucknell Hall of Fame for basketball. Like there's some very good family ties there. And by the way, his brother, Mike Bright Jr. then was an incredibly successful defensive lineman. He just finished up his career at Bucknell as well. He had like 98 tackles, 11 sacks. Like there's a really, he's coming from a family that is very good athletically, we know that, but also it's like when they've gotten to college, they've really taken off and blossomed and proven what their worth is. And I understand Bucknell is not Penn State, but at the same time, that's Penn State's very excited about what would be to come with Marlon Bright. So, you're looking at rankings right now. We have him as a high 3-star, 89th in the country, 4th ranked prospect in New Jersey. The thing with Marlon is like he hasn't really put out much film from his season. And
there's no highlights here for a reason.
Yeah. So I mean, you can watch some complete game film on NFHS. Yeah. Even if you go through like Michael Troutman's film, for example, you'll be able to watch Marlon Bright because he's teammates with Michael Troutman at DePaul Catholic. So those are ways where you can kind of spot what his growth is. But I think the big thing was, came up to camp. Penn State knew the athleticism, knew the base they had there. Visited twice in 2023. He's visited 5 times now in 2024. Excuse me. And that included, I think he was at 2 games this season. I can't remember if he did I know he did the whiteout game, and I can't exactly remember which other one it was. I want to say maybe Illinois or something like that. But long story short, I mean, this guy who's consistently been visiting and a guy who's very high on Troutwine's board. He is, there's a lot of other, linemen, especially offensive tackle types who have come and visited through. And whenever I get the opportunity to ask about, okay, you have Kevin Brown committed, who are these other guys? I mean, Marlon Bright has been consistently the name that I've had people tell me about for a long time now. So I think he's a guy that, in a lot of ways, if we're able to get more film and more evaluation points and stuff like that, as him as a junior coming into a senior, he makes a lot of sense for a player who can move up in the rankings, just based off of, again, the way I know Penn State looks at him, because he is absolutely, if for example, I put this on the board the other day, if Emmanuel Iheanacho and Kevin Brown are that tier 1, right? If that's the tier, Marlon Bright is in that next tier and at the very top of that tier. When we're talking whether it's a guard or whether it's a tackle, doesn't matter. I mean, I felt confident in saying he's one of Penn State's top 5 most important offensive line targets at the moment. And, time will tell if he takes some more visits and all that. But I feel pretty good right now that Penn State is clearly the team to beat.
Yeah, you already have one of those top tier prospects that committed a while ago. So feel pretty good about Penn State's class of 2026, which feels like it's shaping up to be something really good here in the early part of 2020. I guess the end part of 2025, beginning of 25, whatever. It's a weird time. We're still talking about Penn State football at the end of December. I was just thinking during what you were talking about, I can't wait to get into recruiting and looking at some of these high school film, some of those live games you're talking about, but we need to get through all of the now football before I can get to any of that. And, we might be doing this into January. We're all going to find that out next week on New Year's Eve. You might have the chance to ring in the new year with me on the BWI Live postgame show. I don't know if you want to do that.
There's no way I'd rather spend my new year than watching you on the postgame show, buddy. No way.
I don't know if I believe you.
Sorry, honey. I can't go out with you and the kids tonight. I have to make sure I get the BWI postgame T. Frank show. I'll bring one of those little streamers, put a hat on.
Oh yeah. I need to get one of those little kazoo. Is that what it's called? The blower thingy? They go, I don't know. Anyway, we're going to have a show on Monday. And we're going to have a tailgate show Friday at 5 or Tuesday at 5. Tuesday at 5. What a weird time. Yeah, Tuesday at 5, New Year's Eve. We're going to have our post and then the post-game show afterwards. Our all the game content, everything coming up next Tuesday. So we've got all that plus everything at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, which one last time you can subscribe here for just $1. Try us out, and you'll have the time of your life. Invest in something that you love, invest in you, get something out of your money, as opposed to I'm in my 30s. It's weird. I don't like video games anymore, Ryan. I used to love video games. And every time I get to sit down, huh?
I thought you were still a gamer.
I was until this year. And then it just there's something in your, I think I lost my hair and it just flipped the switch in my head. And so, yeah, this is something that we do that you're going to get something out of, as opposed to you play a video game and then oh, great, that was over. And then you sit around, you didn't get anything out of it. You just got the experience. We give you information, all that great stuff. This pitch is falling off the rails. So let's get going. We'll be back then. Talk to you later here on the BWI Live Show.